Okay, let's say we have data in multiple sources that we want to get to. One is an Excel spreadsheet, and the other might be an external database that we want to get into. All right, so let's go ahead and do that now. Hopefully you have downloaded the product Excel workbook from the textbook page. Be sure to put your name at the front of it. And then what we'll do is we'll bring that into Power BI. So we'll go ahead and get an Excel workbook. And I've named mine Mitch Winger Products. You'll name yours your name Products. Open it up. After a minute, we see the navigator here, and we'll select the products sheet. We get a little preview here, and like we've done before, we're going to transform the data rather than just load it in directly, and that takes us into the Power Query Editor that lets us do some of these transformations and keep them. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to eliminate any columns that we're not really interested in looking at right now. So to do that, we're just going to select the columns that we want. Product ID is already selected. I'm going to hit my Control key and then select product name, quantity per unit, and then units in stock. Those are the only ones I want to keep for now. So I'm going to right click any of those yellow headers I've got and just say remove other columns. And that takes me down to just these 4 columns that I'm interested in the products table. Now, while we're still in our query editor, we want to add another data source. So I'm going to go to new source here. And I've got in my most common here, OData field. That's basically an open data feed. And that's what I'm going to get here. I've got a database sitting out there in this open data structure that we can all get to. And that's what we'll do. Now, if you don't happen to have OData feed show up in your most common, you can just say more. And then when you do that, you get the full list of possible data sources that Power BI supports right now. And as you can see, you can scroll down. It's a pretty lengthy list of different types of data sources. So OData, they're not necessarily in alphabetical order. So I can just start typing in the search here if I don't know which of these groups it shows up in. So I'll type in OD, and that's enough. That gives me an OData feed, and I can press connect. And I'll use the basic, I'll keep the basic OData feed. All right, so we'll type in the URL for our OData feed, and that's going to be https://services.odata.org/v3 capital N Northwind, then capital N Northwind .svc/. So we've got there https://services.odata.org/v3/proper Northwind /proper northwind.svc, and we end with a slash and click OK. Now this takes me right to the navigator. You may be asked another, what level of security do you want? Just click OK to click through that. And then that should take you right to this screen here, And basically, we're connected to a database. Now, we don't know what kind of server this database is on. Northwind is actually a database that used to come with Microsoft Access as a sample database. I believe there's a version of Northwind that comes with SQL Server as well. So I'm going to assume it's one of those two types of databases, but not necessarily. Could be any kind of database out there that uses the open data service. Now, the table we're interested in is the orders table. And when I click on orders, I see a preview of what's in that. It's going to be limited to, maybe 50 rows or so. But it gives me a chance to see what the structure of that table looks like, including all the different fields. So that's the field I want. So I'm going to click OK. And that's going to bring it back into my Power Query workspace, where I can do some more transformation to it. Once the table pulls into my Power Query window, I can scroll to the right, see the various field names, and you'll note that I've got a few over here to the right that show up with the data in different color. Customer, employee, order details, and shipper. Now, order details actually is another table that this table links to. If you'll recall from back in your systems day, you may have had some types of line item type tables that are associated with an order that have a many to many type relationship. So that's what we've put up here. There's an order details that's linked to this in a one-to-many relationship. What we would like to do is we would like to expand the order details to see some of the specific fields within that. To do that, I could click on this expand column. And by default, it's going to select all the columns that are in that order details, but I don't want all of them. I only want 3. I want the product ID, I want the unit price, and I want the quantity. And you can see here I have a checklist or a checkbox that says I'm going to keep that order details prefix to all of these field names. And what happens when I do that, I'm going to expand this view here, and I've got 3 new fields instead of order details. So I've got the order details product ID, order details unit price, and order details quantity. Now what we want to do is let's go ahead and create a custom calculated column that calculates the product of that unit price and quantity. So we're going to go to the add column ribbon here and click custom column. And here I have a formula builder where I can tell it how to create this new column. We'll call the new column line total. And that equals, so you're starting the formula here with an equals, and basically I'm just going to take unit price times quantity. Now I could type in order details dot unit price times, but I've got a field picker over here, so I'm just going to do that by clicking. So I'll say my order details unit price, I double click to bring them in, times, and then I can also, instead of double clicking, just say insert down here, and that will insert it into my formula as well. You can see it checks my syntax along the way, no syntax errors right now. So you can click OK. And that gives me a new column. That's my line total, unit price times quantity. Now this data type shows up as just kind of a catch-all. It can be anything. We want this to be a fixed decimal, 2 fixed decimal places, which is the default. So I'm just going to click on the format icon here, change it to a fixed decimal number. And I now have a nice lined up column. I've got commas for the thousands or whatever your system is set up to show for decimals and thousands. Now, much like we did for the earlier table, the products table, I don't need all these columns for my reporting needs today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select just the columns I want. I want my order date. I want my ship city. I want my ship country. I want my product ID, unit price, and quantity fields that I exploded out. I also want my new line total column that I just created. And just like I did before, I will select remove other columns to focus just on those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 columns. Make that 7. So I now have a view that just shows me those 7 columns I'm interested in utilizing today. And you can see I've got the applied steps over there to the right that shows me step by step what I've done. I can actually take a look at that in my main Power BI desktop under my modeling. I can take a look at the detailed steps that took place in building this. So lots of different ways to view what you're doing. And I can also save this and automate running it as I work more with Power BI and my various tools. The next thing we might want to do is I don't necessarily need to know that these came from the order details column or table. So I'll just rename them and get rid of that order details table prefix. I can also rearrange the columns. So instead of making my line total all the way out to the right, I can just click on it, drag it over to the left so that it's the first piece of numeric data that I deal with here. So I've lined it up just to the right of ship country. And you can see it even tells me I've reordered the columns in the steps that I've applied. I can take a look at the products table again and see what steps I applied there. You know, I basically just removed the columns I didn't want. So far I'm in pretty good shape. So at this point, I can go ahead back to my home ribbon menu and close and apply back to Power BI. So back here in Power BI, I now have my 2 tables and all the various fields in those tables, including those that are quantitative measures, dates, or dimensions. Now we've used the modeling view over here to create relationships in our previous tutorial. We can also do it right here from the modeling tab in our ribbon. And I go to modeling and click manage relationships. And we can see here that Power BI has already identified that there's a probable relationship between the product ID in the orders table and the product ID in the products table. And that's fine. That's actually the way we want it. It has auto-detected that already for us. So we can leave it the way it is, or we can open it up to edit it and just make sure that we like what it looks like. And here we'll see it looks very similar to what it looked like when we clicked on the relationship line in the modeling view before. So we've got the product ID highlighted. We've got the product ID highlighted. It's a many to one. It's active. So yeah, so far that looks good. And we can always validate in the modeling view that, yeah, now we have our orders and our products linked up. We can double click on the relationship line and see that same information. All right, at this point, we're ready to go ahead and start building visualizations. So we can start off by just, let's pull a quantity in. And by just checking on it, Power BI brings it in automatically. Next, I can say, okay, I want to know the product name across the bottom. So now I've got myself a nice quantity by product name visual here that shows me order information for each of my products. And I can sort, make sure that I'm sorting by quantity and sorting descending so that I've got my most popular by units products listed first. So if I bring this up to a full-sized chart, we can see the full name of everything and all the different products we have. So that looks good. That's a decent little start. Now I'll resize this and put it up in the corner. So the next thing we might do is, well, let's say, what about dollar amounts? So let's do our line item totals. So that's that line total field we created. And let's do order date. Now, right now, we just have order date kind of lined up there by year. But what we want in this case, instead of it in the hierarchy, let's just do it by actual individual day. So in my visualization, the axis information here, I'm going to take the drop down here from order date and just say, instead of using the date hierarchy, let's just do it purely by date. Okay. And when we do that, we now see individual sales by individual date. And the last thing we might want to do is, okay, let's go somewhere new, blank in the canvas. And let's say, what was the shipping country? So of course, now we realize that we have mapped data here. And so Power BI builds us a map view. So instead of just a plain view, we'll say, let's bring in the line item total. And now we'll see basically total sales by country based on the relative size of each bubble. Now that we've got this in place, we can do all the filtering using slicers or other types of filters that we want. Now, like we have in other visuals, these are now interactive. So if I were to click on the United States, the other visuals and this visual changes to highlight the US information. I can do the same thing by instead clicking on Canada. Now I see what is taking place that's Canada specific, along with the Canadian purchases each particular date. So we're now using two separate tables that we've joined together to make visualizations. Hopefully that made sense and you get a feel for how that can be done. You can join as many different data sources as you could in a relational database using this. Again, you'll want to be mindful of performance issues as you gather more and more data tables, but certainly there may be opportunities for you to take a look at maybe employment figures and tax collections, for example. Or if you're doing some health studies, take a look at CDC data and map that against economic data, or maybe even employment data for that as well. So you can gather data from multiple sources, pull them together, and do your analysis. I hope you found this useful, and we'll move on with more tutorials.